Welcome everyone to today's Career Champion training session called the Intersections of Identity and Career Development. My name is Lisa Famularo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director for Equity and Inclusion here in the Center for Career Development. I am also currently serving as the chair of our internal Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and have been in that position for just over 2 years now, but I've been part of the committee for a while. And I also here on the SOARS campus am one of our career coaches, so meet with students and talk to them about all different topics that fall under the umbrella of career development.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Malone. I use she, her pronouns. I am Associate Director for Regional Campuses for the Center for Career Development, and I'm also a member of the DE&I Committee with the Center for Career Development. So I sit on the Stanford campus, but I work with all of the regional campuses to bring career services and programs and resources to each of those campuses.
All right, so for today's presentation, we just wanted to give you a sense of what we're going to be covering. So there will be two main sections. First off, we are going to do a very brief overview of some of the key findings of a survey that we conducted in 2021, so last year, on how students' identity impacts their career development journeys. For those of you who attended the Career Everywhere conference on the SOARS campus a couple of weeks ago, you will recognize some of this information, but we know that not everybody here today was at that conference, so we did want to give a brief quick overview, but then the rest of the presentation will be new, and the second half, or really the latter 3/4, we'll be talking about ways that we have been utilizing the results of the survey to develop strategies to support students' career development, especially as it relates to their identity and how identity plays a role. So I'm going to turn it over to Tara to get us started, and if you have questions at any point about the results or about some of the takeaways from the survey, please feel free to ask us along the way.
Okay, so we'll start with key findings. Just a brief overview. So this research study was a project that was under the DE&I committee. Just to give you a little bit of background about the committee, it has been in existence for 7 years. At the time that we took on this research project, we had 10 team members, which included administrators, career coaches, members of our corporate partner relations team. So those are individuals who work directly with employers, as well as graduate assistants. So as I said, we've had this committee for several years, but in 2020, we added the term equity to the committee's title, really with the intentional charge to expand resources and services that nurture equitable access to career education and advancement for students. So during that time, we also, had a discussion about, what do students want in regard to diversity in career, and how can we best serve our diverse student populations. So we decided to put together the research study to really learn about our students' experiences through a DE&I lens, and then to evaluate how our existing services are meeting those needs. So that's what led us to the Identity and Career Development research study. All right, so the first thing that we needed to do was develop a research team. So as I said, we had 10 committee members, and we knew that would be kind of too many cooks in the kitchen to be able to really hone in on this research. So we identified 2 project leads, and then also other members of our Career Center team were involved as well. So we do have someone who leads assessment on the Center for Career Development team. We had an assessment graduate assistant, our director, and then the chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, which is Lisa. So we decided that as much as we wanted to gain this information as quickly as possible so that we could evaluate and make any changes and new ideas, we really wanted to do this right, and especially since we knew we would be dealing with sensitive information. So we decided to go through the process of using the Institutional Review Board, really to ensure the highest level of ethical standards, and again, to ensure that we were approaching this research study in the best way. In addition to that, we consulted with campus cultural centers and faculty in the development of the survey. And then it resulted in us developing a 40-question survey. So when we distributed it, we decided also that we wanted it to be anonymous. So it wasn't attached to any student records. It was also completely voluntary and sent to all UConn students. So every UConn student had the opportunity to participate. So we had a great response rate. So in over 35 days, we received 1,538 responses.
All right, so we are going to dive into some of the key responses from the survey. Again, at 1,500 responses, 40 questions, there was so much data, and we've done a lot of, disaggregating and looking at different identity groups and campuses and class years. But for today, we're sticking with a very high level just to give you a sense of the type of information that we discovered. So one of the very first questions we asked on the survey was, do you feel you need career guidance? And on the graph you see here on the screen, you can see the percentage of students from each self-reported identity group and whether or not they responded yes to that question. So in general, an overwhelming majority of students reported needing career guidance, but the highest percentage were among international students, Asian American and Pacific Islander students, and Latinx students, which you can see are the 3 green bars on the graph. And the percentages of reporting yes from all of the affinity groups that we focused on in the study were higher than the percentage of white students, which is an indication to us that our students of color, especially on campus, are feeling more so in need of career guidance than our white students, which is not necessarily surprising, but the data from the survey did specifically confirm that. Another question that we asked fairly early on in the survey is, what are your top career concerns? And we took a look at the responses to that question, and we were able to identify the top career concern for each of the affinity communities that we studied. So as you can see on the slide here, the top career concern for Asian American and Pacific Islander students, first generation students, and religiously affiliated students was the lack of access to their desired job or internship opportunities. For Latinx, LGBTQ+, and students with disabilities, it was feeling intimidated or unwelcome in a professional environment. For Black and African American students, it was lack of diversity in the workplace. For international and doctoral students, it was lack of access to a professional network. And then for cisgender women, it was, I don't know what careers are available or exist. Of course, students expressed many other career concerns than what you see here on the slide, but it was really helpful to see these sort of top answers emerge from the different communities to identify, this is one of the things that's really on the mind of the student population and something that we can, better address with them to not eliminate their concern, of course, because that's not realistic, but at least to address it. One of the other really telling questions on the survey was, do you feel there are aspects of your identity that have made you susceptible to negative experiences when seeking career guidance? And we did not specifically ask this question within the context of UConn. It was just, in general, do you feel that this is the case? And the affinity groups with the highest percentage of respondents who said yes to this question were students with disabilities, LGBTQ+ students, and Black and African American students. And there was a pretty significant, it was at least a 3 percentage point difference between those groups and the rest of the groups. But once again, the percentage of every affinity group was higher than the percentage of white students. So we're seeing another concrete example of how students of color specifically, but also students from all of our affinity communities, are more concerned about this than our white students are. And there were some open-ended questions on the survey as well, and we just pulled 3 quotes here today to show you some of the narratives that we heard throughout the survey. So these quotes were specifically in a chance where students had to elaborate on the previous question about negative career experiences. And I'm just going to read them because I can't summarize them in a way that's as powerful as the students did. So the first one says, as an LGBTQ student, it is hard to get specific guidance on how to navigate the job search / interview environment when the person advising hasn't had experiences with LGBTQ related prejudice. It's a real thing and a big concern for us during the job search. So this quote is really about feeling that they're susceptible to negative experiences because their advisor or the person who's guiding them doesn't have that shared experience. The second quote says, I think most, quote, hustle and grind culture is not achievable for people with physical health disabilities or learning executive function disabilities. I have taken career advice that was geared towards people with more energy and resources and resulted in biting off more than I could chew. So this one is a quote a little bit more about the advice that was given and how it was not specifically geared towards that student, and there were consequences for that. And then lastly, this one is a very identity focused one. I'm a Black woman and it has impacted the way that those giving career guidance have helped me. Some focus on trying to get me to perform a certain way so that I am more, quote, pleasant for white employers. So this is a specific example of how a student's identity has impacted the career advice that they have received. And then the last piece of data from the survey that we thought was noteworthy to share today is we did ask a question of where do you typically go to get your career advice? And once again, we broke down the results by affinity community, and you can see that overwhelmingly friends and family are the top two groups that our students are turning to, regardless of the affinity community that they're a part of. When you look at source number 3, there is a little bit more variation. So it might be faculty, it might be social media, it might be a mentor, but faculty being kind of the lead there. So I think that's this particular slide is really important to show all of you, because if you are faculty members, or I think sometimes students will group like advisors or staff members into that sort of faculty category, they are, relying on you as sources of career advice. So being aware of like these concerns that they have and challenges that they're facing is really important to make sure that you can address those with them. So to summarize our key takeaways from the survey, just based on these 4 questions that we have time to share today, some of the main things that we noticed were most students across affinity groups reported a need for career support or career guidance, with the highest percentage, like we said earlier, among Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and international students. The greatest need for additional support lies with serving LGBTQ+ students, students with disabilities, and Black and African American students, because those were the groups that reported the lowest percentages on some of the questions where they felt like they were getting adequate career support. One group that we did look at in the study that really didn't fall on any of the extreme ends of any question was first generation students. They kind of got lost in the middle of a lot of the questions, and that was something that was an interesting observation for us, because it seems like they're just in the middle, and need some support in some areas, might not need some support in other areas, but something to consider for sure. Along with that, themes were not unanimous among affinity communities. So, the career concerns varied. People in specific communities had differing opinions. So that's something that we have to consider as well. And then lastly, students turned to their immediate network for career support, as we saw by that previous slide, really featuring friends, family, and faculty. So we hope that's helpful to kind of be a quick summary of the survey for those of you this is the first time seeing it. I hope that that's enough information to really wrap your head around things. And if anybody has any questions about any of that, we are happy to answer them. So Tara, is there anything that you want to add about the results before we move into the next section?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. Awesome. I will pause for just a second to see if anybody has any questions, but if not, we will move into some of the things that we have done based on these results. All right, not seeing any questions at the moment. I will move on, but we will definitely have time for questions at the end of the session as well. So during the remainder of the session, we are going to talk about 4 of the initiatives that we have undertaken in response to the survey. I'm going to keep saying this, but there was so much data. We've done so many things with it, but we are just going to focus on a couple of them today. And we've chosen specifically these 4 because as career champions or faculty and staff on campus, we feel that these are the ones that are probably most relevant or related to you in your roles. So the first theme that we want to talk about is navigating conversations about the topics that are brought up in the survey with students. And I'm going to put up this next slide. There's a lot of words on here. Don't worry, I will read it in a second. But I do want to say that one of the things that we instituted is every week we have career coach meetings in our office. So all of the staff members that meet directly with students, we get together and we talk about what we're seeing, how we can better support students, new resources, whatever it is that's kind of on our minds that week. And one thing that we started doing is we started doing a case study initiative where we are taking specific concerns and scenarios that students brought up in the survey and specifically talking about them as a staff, so that if that student were to come into our office and meet with us during a career coaching appointment, we would feel a little bit more prepared to address their concern and, direct them to the appropriate resources and be able to really, support them as best as possible. And it's been definitely a major undertaking to come up with all of these case studies, but I think we've been doing a really good job. It's something where every staff member on our team is required to come up with one, so that the perspectives are varying, and it can be either really based on a real scenario that happened, or one that maybe didn't necessarily happen but could. So I'm going to read this case study as an example. This is one of the ones we did a couple weeks ago. I think it was at the end of the spring semester, but it relates to a couple of the themes that came up in the survey. And then afterwards, I will share all of the debrief questions that we use to process the case studies. So this case study is about a student named Marie. So Marie, who uses she, her pronouns, is a first-generation college student nearing the completion of her first year at UConn. While she is currently an ACES student, Marie states that she intends to study nursing. Both of Marie's parents emigrated from Haiti, and Marie is the oldest of her 4 siblings. She lives off campus at home with her family. Marie comes to you to talk about her current major and career choice. Marie discloses that she has not done well in her science classes this year and is concerned about disappointing her family. She also discloses that not only is she struggling in science, she isn't really interested in it. She really likes her psychology classes. However, she quickly explains that majoring in psychology is not an option because her parents would not understand how psychology would lead to a suitable career choice. She explains that going to therapy, for example, is not a cultural norm and is seen as shameful in her family. Marie says she can't even imagine having a conversation with her parents about her interest in psychology. Marie seems to light up when she talks about how she is interested in potentially helping women to heal from trauma related to complications and loss during childbirth. She says that women's issues are largely ignored, particularly in her culture, and she feels pulled towards making a difference. She says that she is considering leaving college due to her poor grades and indecisiveness about her area of study because it isn't fair to waste her family's money when she doesn't have a clear plan. She works part-time as a clerical assistant at a medical office where she is a valued employee, and they are willing to convert her to full-time. Marie is considering the immediate benefit of working to contribute more financially, to the household, and wonders if she should take a year off to figure things out. So just quickly kind of looking at the themes that are coming up in this case, we can see that the theme in the survey about students turning to their family and friends for career support. This student is obviously, heavily discussing their career with their family and their parents specifically, and being given advice and guidance from their family to go into nursing. We can also see the theme of not having access to the desired internship or job opportunities because it's clear that the student is interested in psychology but doesn't have access to those opportunities for a variety of reasons, including the parental and familial pressure that they're feeling. We can also see the impacts of being a first-generation student and having to navigate the career and job process, as something that their family did not go through. So you can see a lot of the themes of the survey are coming up in this particular case study. And like I promised earlier, I want to share the questions that our staff usually uses to debrief case studies, because I would say that they're not like the typical case study debrief questions. So rather than the debrief question being like, what would you do in this situation? We really try to bring the questions like back to our practices as career coaches and really be critical of ourselves and how we would respond to this situation. So the first question that we always discuss is, what are the overt and covert challenges the student may be facing in this moment, and kind of outlining all of those things like I was just doing, brainstorming out loud a few seconds ago. But then question 2 is, what preconceived notions, assumptions, or biases might you be bringing into the conversation as the career coach? So, answering question 1, what is our perception of the situation? And then question 2, how might that perception be inaccurate based on, preconceived notions, assumptions, and things like that? Number 3 is what questions might you ask the student to garner a better understanding of the case? And then lastly, number 4 are what resources pertain to this case study so that we can share resources and support one another if we experience something like this. So I do want to pause here for a moment and invite, the group to respond to any of these questions based on the case that we just read. I'll go back to that slide in a second. But I know that this case is very geared towards career, and it's a very typical conversation that we have in our office. But as we know, students are going to people all over campus and asking them career-related questions. So we would love to hear if you have any thoughts on how you might respond to some of these questions if you were to experience this case.
I'm also curious if this is a case that sounds familiar to anyone. So you can either, put it in the chat like, yes, I've kind of had this sort of conversation or heard this scenario before with other students, or unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's a good question, Tara.
This is Amy McKeon. I'm in the Department of Allied Health Sciences. This is a very common conversation that we have, especially around students coming in thinking that they're going or proclaiming that they're going to be a doctor, and then realizing that their strengths and their interests really align with something different. And so sometimes that change is big, like this perhaps is, and sometimes it's seemingly, from my cultural viewpoint, really small of a transition. And so it's important to me to notice and listen to the assumptions that I'm making while listening to their story before I respond, so that I can be conscious of those natural, or not natural perhaps, but those biases that I'm hearing myself have, so that I can communicate with as much respect as I can for the complications in the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Amy. I super agree that the perception of like how big of a transition or a change or a life event this is can super vary. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It looks like we also have a note in the chat. I've also encountered this situation many times when advising students who are interested in the individualized major. Yep, I can totally see that. Looking for a way to kind of combine or touch on all of these areas, perhaps, because they can't figure out how to satisfy their expectations, their familial expectations, and navigating all of that, for sure. I can totally see that.
Looks like a hand is raised, Nicholas.
Hi, so I actually have a question. So I work in the EEB office, and I employ students who, work every day in my office with me and my team. And so I've not experienced a situation like this because we don't really have a lot of, I guess we don't get that in detail about the students' background and all of that, because mostly we're just talking about work, or I try to, obviously being a career champion, try to have those conversations, but we don't really get this in depth in like their family history or anything like that. Would it be appropriate? I feel like a little uncomfortable if I were to like ask someone about all of that. But I'm wondering how to, I guess, incorporate that into our conversations without just blatantly saying like, what's your family history, or what does your family think about you doing XYZ?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just not sure how to like get that information without it being just like super awkward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I can give, one piece of advice, and then Tara, you can definitely jump in as well. But this is actually something that we talked about actually as a coaching staff yesterday. Like at what point do we invite these topics to be part of the career conversation, especially if the student doesn't bring them up naturally? And I think that the answer that we really landed on is it's not necessarily our job to bring all of these factors into the conversation if it's something that the student doesn't want to talk about, or like it's just not salient to the student, like it's not part of their story, and it's not something they want to be part of their story. So a question that we often rely on here in the Center for Career Development is, as you're talking to somebody about their career, maybe asking them like, what are the factors that you're considering in making your career decision? Or what are the concerns or, things that you're trying to juggle as you are finalizing this decision or whatever, however you want to phrase that. And then that kind of like invites the student to bring it up if they would like to, but if they're like, you know what, I'm good, I don't need to talk about this, then they can just, say that and move on. So that's a question that I really like, and it's something that I know a lot of other coaches use as well. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I agree. Like this is something that would come up in the context of a career session for sure. But then, it reminds me of we have a whole student worker team here in Stanford, and I was just meeting with them a couple of weeks ago and reminding them that we are also here to support them in their educational journey, in their career journey. So sometimes when we get into the day-to-day, it is just kind of focused on the task at hand and getting things done because they're showing up for their shift. But I try to reinforce as much as I can that we're also here as mentors and as a resource for them, and kind of inviting that opportunity, like, that my door is always open if they ever want to sit down and talk about what's going on, with them with their major choice or their career choices or their plans. So I think maybe just kind of reminding students that you're available, not just as a supervisor, but also as a resource and a mentor. And then maybe some of these conversations will start to organically unfold when they know they can kind of sit down and have that chat. On the flip of that, when I'm working with students, besides our student workers, when, kind of talking about making the most of their on-campus jobs or their internships, I try to remind students too that, to take advantage of the opportunity to learn from their supervisor beyond the tasks that they're doing. So, maybe see if they can schedule one-on-one with their supervisor or do informational interviews with the team members that they're working with, so that they're really, gaining as much as they can from that experience. So I think it's kind of this two-way street of maximizing the use of the people resources that are there for them. And then, I think, again, some of these conversations might start to unfold.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a good one. And I do think that ties into kind of the closing point on this, initiative. This is the question that we asked ourselves to design this case study initiative. Like, what are the DE&I and career related topics that we are encountering in our conversations with students, and combining that with the survey results is what led to the specific topics that we've built these case studies around. And now I think because we're on this biweekly cadence where every other week we are discussing with each other how to be better prepared for these conversations, at least, I feel better prepared. I would probably say that Tara feels better prepared as well. And I think that's a narrative we've heard from our staff as well. So I think, one of the takeaways from today is I would encourage all of you in your role to think about this question, like, what are the common themes or topics that I am hearing from students that have to do with their identity and how that might be impacting their career journey. And it might only be a few things, it might be a ton of things, it super depends. And then maybe think about how your staff could become more comfortable with those topics. Or let us know. We do have a lot of case studies besides the one that we shared, and we would be happy to share those with all of you if that's something that you would be interested in, taking a look at with your staff, and maybe or even just practicing like independently and becoming more comfortable with advice in those situations. So I will kind of open the invitation if anybody has a topic that they would like to answer this question with and say, like, this is something I hear from students all the time. Feel free to put it in the chat and maybe we can circle back to some of these topics. But in the interest of time, I am going to move on and talk a little bit about our next initiative. So one of the other themes that came up in the qualitative responses of the survey was people really appreciated the effort that we were going through to listen to students' concerns and incorporate them into our operations. And so out of that, we built a program that I'm going to talk about that really supports student leadership and allowing students to guide the initiatives and projects that we're working on, especially for specific affinity communities. So the program that we built, we called it the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Career Ambassador Program. The description of it is down here on the bottom of the screen. So it's a group of undergraduate students dedicated to exploring and promoting the intersection of identity and career development. Ambassadors provide resume critiques, present to student organizations about career-related topics, plan and host networking opportunities for specific identity groups, and manage the Center for Career Development's affinity community pages on our website. And this year we were able to hire 8 students. You can see the 8 of them on the screen here. They are wonderful, and you can also see which communities they are working on. But each of these students is really like conceptualizing and executing initiatives for the specific community that they're overseeing in a way that we have like never had the staff power to do before at such a high level. So for example, one of their responsibilities is to plan and coordinate events. So these are 8 examples of the events that we are doing this year, that most of which we have never done before. So we have an event about navigating the US job and internship search for international students. We have a women's networking forum coming up in November. We have a resume building session that one of our ambassadors is doing with the Asian American Cultural Center. We have, as part of First Gen celebration in November, a presentation called LinkedIn for First Gen students. We are working on a presentation about the employment options for students with DACA and undocumented students. There's a networking event coming up next week for LGBTQ+ and students with disabilities, because those are the 2 heritage months that are happening right now. We have a Latinx networking night coming up, and then we also have a just career resources for the Black community presentation that's being done at the African American Cultural Center. So our students have really taken this responsibility and like run with it. And you know, we're still getting off the ground. I would like to see even more events than the examples that you see on the screen here, but I'm so proud to see all of these events that weren't happening in previous years because of this ambassador program, and because our ambassadors have identified a need in the student population that they are able to fill with these events. So one thing that we would like to kind of ask of all of you is, when you're working with students, letting them know that this is like, these events are happening. If they go to the Career Center, if they look at our calendar, there are events that have to do with specific identity communities, or that are for specific identity communities, and they should take advantage of those if they want to, you know, network with and benefit from others who share those identities. Another example along similar lines is our ambassadors are writing blog posts for our website. Those of you who are familiar with our website will know that like right on the homepage, we have our blog featured, and then we also have all of the affinity communities, which with blogs about those specific identity groups. And I just wanted to share some of the examples of blog topics that our ambassadors have chosen, because once again, they know what students want to hear about, they know what students want to read, and they are writing about those topics. So you know, Jennifer is working on confidence tips for women in the workplace. Andrea is working on a guide to American workplace culture for international students. Brianna is working on an article about the generational impacts of career expectations on the Asian American community, because she has had some experiences with family pressure in certain career decisions and things like that. Support networks and how students with disabilities can benefit from them is a blog that our student Emily just published. Heidi's working on something about a learning community on campus for Latinx students and how that organization develops Latinx professionals to encourage other students to join. Alexis is working on a blog about the internal and external pressures first-gen students face when making career decisions. There are so many. Maya is working on an article about how Black students and professionals can support their mental health at work, especially with everything that's going on in the world with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then lastly, our student Camille is working on an article about the work authorization differences between being undocumented and having DACA, and what students need to know about those situations. So again, just let your students know these resources are here and they can read them on our website and hopefully learn from them, and you know, have that be beneficial for them. So our ambassadors are working on so many projects, but the last one that I just want to focus on really quickly is we do have these affinity communities on our website that Tara is going to talk a little bit more about, but we know that they're overwhelming in the sense that they have a lot of information on them. And when a student just like shows up on our website and lands on an affinity community, you know, it might take some practice to be able to use that affinity community most effectively. So our ambassadors have set out to create these like welcome videos. So when the students arrive at the communities, there's somebody there telling them how to make the most of that page. So this is a example. Heidi is our Latinx student ambassador, and she completed her video first, so it's ready. We're just about to upload it to the website, but it's really awesome. Like there's actually like a face that students can see when they're going to that page and relate to someone, and this is now a project that all of our other ambassadors are working on. So just to summarize this section before I turn it over to Tara to go over the next two, just spreading awareness that these ambassadors exist is something that we're really excited about this year, and having them be resources to their peers, other students who share their identities. And then also, if you all think of any opportunities that you would be able to partner with these students, we would love that. So if you want to have one of them come into a staff meeting or a class and talk about, these resources or what their role is in the center and how the center can support them, we're always happy to do those sorts of partnerships. So just let us know.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about how we took steps to welcome conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion within our sessions, and to let students know that we're kind of like a safe space to have these sorts of conversations. So one thing that we started with was looking at our staff bios and ways that we can make them more relatable and welcoming to students. Okay, so we wanted to let students know about the diversity of our own staff. So some of those earlier comments, and again, that was just a sampling. There were many comments that talked about, I'm not sure if I could talk to a staff member on the Center for Career Development team if they don't relate to my experience. And of course, everybody has unique experiences. So just because you share the same identity doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same experiences. However, there is like some sort of comfort in knowing that there's like a little aspect that students might be able to relate to with a staff member. Initially with our bios, we were using kind of a more traditional format, which talked about our previous work and our credentials and our area of focus. And those elements are still part of our bios. But as you'll see in the slides that we'll share, we started to warm them up a little bit to reveal more about who we are as people, as individuals, and hoping that would help to relate to students more. We also have the opportunity to contribute blog posts to our career and affinity community pages. And so we started talking about what are some ways that we can incorporate our own career journeys into our writing. And again, hopefully that this kind of sparks the conversation with students that they would have with us individually, or that they're able to kind of learn something from reading, some of these blog posts on their own. All right, so I know this is a lot of text, and we're going to kind of dive into these as we go through the slides, but just a little snapshot. These are what our new bios look like. So mine and Lisa's here. So I'm going to go through and break down each of the components. But if you go on our website, you can read each of our bios in more detail. All right, so as I was saying and reviewing the results of the identity and career development study, one of the requests and suggestions from students was to provide a way to get to know our staff better. So we had a few initiatives in mind to do this, but the first one was to update our website bios to include more information about ourselves and to make it particularly relatable to students. And so in developing this new format, one of the things that we started with was looking at other school websites and just kind of taking a piece from each of those websites that we liked the best. All right, so to kind of break down how we did this, and one of the reasons why we're sharing this is, maybe this is something that you might want to try with your own bios on your websites. So the first thing we did was we started with an opening paragraph. So we kind of looked at this as, if a student were to be doing an informational interview with us, how would we conversationally answer their questions? So we wanted to have like this first person kind of response of an explanation of our role, and kind of thinking about as if we're talking to students. Now certainly other individuals access our bios, so we did want to kind of keep in mind that there might be employers and faculty and staff who are also reading our bios, but really first and foremost, we serve students. And so that was really most important to us, is that when we're writing this, that we have it in a tone that is, again, relatable to our student population. So we asked our team to consider incorporating aspects of their own identities and career journeys as much as they felt comfortable. So there's kind of varying degrees of what's kind of revealed and shared in these bios. But I will say that each and every one of our team members has a little something about who they are as an individual that has really had a positive result on students who are reading these bios. We actually anecdotally have had students say to us, oh, I read that you studied this in college and I'm really interested in that, or, so they are reading them and they are actually following up with, certain career coaches based on what they've read and what they related to in their bios. So again, we encouraged writing in the first person, and to kind of guide creating that opening paragraph, these were some prompts that we provided. So what do I do? Why do I do it? And what's my favorite part of my role? All right, so this is our director, Nancy. And so I remember actually when we were putting this together, although Nancy was on board with this, and this was one of the things that she wanted to do and was part of the process of gathering examples, when it came time to write it, I remember Nancy sharing and other team members, I'm not quite sure what to say. I don't really know if there's a part of my identity that students will really relate to. And so I'll share kind of a brainstorming process that could be helpful, but I'm just going to read what the final result was for Nancy's opening paragraph. So it says, in my role, I lead the Center for Career Development on a day-to-day basis, supervising staff, managing and developing programs and services, and troubleshooting opportunities that arise. In the past 28 years, I've had the opportunity to manage, innovate, strategize, and work directly with students. Although I've held many roles during my tenure at the Career Center, the consistent theme in all of my work I've done is that it benefits UConn students. As an undergraduate at Ithaca College, I remember quite clearly being confused about my future and unsure about what I would do upon graduation, which makes my work in the Career Center personal and meaningful. I hope that the work I've done over the years has helped students like me who had or are having a difficult time making decisions about the future. So, one of the things that we've talked about for our center is that how do we make our center more welcoming and to lessen the intimidation factor? Because thinking about career and thinking about one's future can be anxiety producing, and it could be intimidating when you're coming to talk to individuals who, have these degrees and all this years of experience, and students may kind of feel like they need to have it figured out before they even come to us. So one of the nice things about the way that Nancy approached this is that she made it a relatable that although I'm in my career now and I've been in this great career for many years, I was once in your shoes. When I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So that invites the conversation with students who may also be struggling with, what do I major in? What do I want to do with my future? All right, so the next part is giving a little snapshot, little bullet points that make up your bio. So some elements here, your hometown, it could be where you were born, where you're raised, or where you currently reside. So there's, some kind of like ways to build rapport, just like, being from the same place, right? A few things that you enjoy, either inside work, outside work, or a combination. So this is interesting because sometimes like, a staff member may not want to come out and reveal a part of their identity either. So there might be, some things they may want to kind of keep private, or maybe they don't have that particular affinity group, but maybe they've done work with that particular population. So sometimes like, having things like, where you've done volunteer work, what organizations are important to you, what are you passionate about, can kind of subtly reveal aspects of your identity or areas that you are again passionate about. So that was kind of like a way to weave in those aspects of one's identity. And then also advice to students. So anything that you want students to know. Some people used a quote, some, kind of gave some wise, like words of wisdom. So again, just kind of to warm up and to talk directly to the students. All right, so so this is continuing Nancy's bio. So I won't read the whole thing, but so revealing hometown and talking about her creativity. And so this is an example of the volunteer work that I was talking about. So it says I've been volunteering for Habitat for Humanity Women's Build Committee, and I've led a team to volunteer for Build each year. So Nancy's involvement with community organizations reveals what she's passionate about, and maybe could be an area of interest that a student would want to talk about. All right. And then again, we still can include all of the same traditional things like the credentials, degrees. But then we also talked about, what are some of the favorite projects or experiences that you had like in undergrad or in graduate school? And again, there could be some relatable things there, or just kind of serving as a role model of, how you can get involved and make the most of your college experience. And then we also list our previous roles as well. All right, so this is just an example. All right. Okay, so I mentioned that there's an activity that can be used if you are thinking about doing this and maybe having some writer's block or not quite sure, what aspects of your identity, would be most relevant and so forth. So this is actually taken from an activity from edchange.org. It's called Circles of My Multicultural Self. So the idea is that we have many different aspects of our identities, and it goes beyond just race and ethnicity. So I put myself here as an example. So some of the things that I would relate to: being a helper counselor, being first gen, my hometown, being an artist, my student leadership in undergrad, and being passionate about DE&I. And so in the next slides, we'll kind of see how that plays out. All right, so this is mine. So here, so I talk about, what I do, but then also talking about, it says, I've been in the career development field for 20 years. I still remember my undergraduate days as a first-gen college student. And based on my experiences, one of my passions is working with first-gen and diverse populations. I mentioned overseeing the first-gen affinity community. And then, again, going into my motivation for my work and my favorite part of my job. So then next, things that I enjoy. So incorporating the creativity. So talking about being a socially conscious creative and how I, I'm an artist, but also I like to use creativity in program planning and the work that I do as a career development professional. And then in my my undergraduate years, I was part of a student organization. I helped to revamp a student organization called Ebony, which was my undergrad at Emerson College. It was Emerson's Black student organization. So again, this is a way to reveal pieces of identity, but then also to kind of model, being involved on campus and the benefits of that. All right. So we won't have time to, we kind of envisioned that maybe we can do some brainstorming with the circles of my multicultural self. I know for the interest of time, we won't be able to do that, but definitely, try it out if it's something that you're thinking about in regards to your own bios. If you want to think about, what are some ways that I could incorporate aspects of who I am, or again, kind of invite those conversations through your bios, that is definitely a very helpful activity to go through. So I definitely encourage trying it. All right, so next we're going to talk about how we're able to talk about identity and career through our blog posts. Okay, so we have on our webpage a section called Affinity Communities. So Affinity Communities are identity-focused groups that provide students with specialized content that integrates diversity, equity, and inclusion within their career development journey. So each Affinity page provides resources for faculty, staff, employers, and alumni to interact with students by writing blogs and participating in the Husky Mentor Network and guiding students as a career champion. So these are our affinity pages right now. So and again, each of these features relevant content. And so today we're going to focus particularly on the blog posts. So we have two examples. So this is one that I wrote on conquering imposter syndrome. And this actually came about because of a conversation that I had with a student in a career coaching appointment. And what he was describing to me sounded very familiar. It was kind of a shared experience for sure. And it was when he was practicing for an upcoming interview and was kind of getting tripped up in his responses. I was noticing that although he knew what he wanted to say, it was kind of coming out, a bit choppy. And after when we reflected on it, he was saying that he was trying to speak in a certain way that he perceived would be professional, but then was getting tripped up. So we talked a lot about what that meant, like how does he define professional? And in our conversations it was revealed that he was kind of feeling like a bit of an imposter in going in for these interviews. So afterwards I was like thinking about it, and I'm like, wow, I have definitely felt that way in more than once in my career development. And it prompted me to write this blog post, because I started thinking, like, it's not just me that has experienced that. It's not just that one student. There's other students that are going through something similar. And so in order to reach as many students as possible, and again, to let students know that this is something that they can be honest about in their conversations with us, I decided to write, to kind of put myself out there and share my experience and write about it. So this is just a little excerpt about it. So one of the things that I honed in on was the first time that I taught a graduate level course in my program that I graduated from, and walking up to the front of the room and kind of being mistaken as a student. And then, I wasn't sure if that was in my head or if the class was kind of thinking like, who's this, person coming up to teach us, and kind of not buying that I was really the professor for the class. And so I kind of struggled with it that whole semester, being over prepared and being self-conscious. And definitely it has gotten better and better through the years, and I'm not as self-conscious, but I talking to the student, it kind of brought me back to that time, and I thought it was worth sharing. And so the next one is actually one that was done by our intern in our office, who happens to be a student leader for Huskies in Christ. And so this was for our religiously affiliated affinity group. And she talked about how you can find a career that aligns with your beliefs. And, we didn't actually ask her to share her experience, but as she was doing her research, she said, as I'm writing this, I keep going into the first person because I can relate to this topic so much, because I experienced it, and I was looking for, jobs that align with my values. And I said, well, if you want to write in the first person, I think that students would really appreciate that, because, maybe another student can relate to your experience. And so this ended up being the end result. Again, this is just a little excerpt of her blog, but we're trying to encourage, ourselves as team members to think about what are aspects of our own experiences that are relatable to students, and can we share a bit of our story, but then also to give voice to our diverse students and, give them the opportunity to share their experiences as well. So with that said, you can all become a career contributor. So on our main website, up in the corner, there's a button that you can press to get to this section, become a career contributor. And one of the first options is to post a blog. You can also promote any DE&I career related events and so forth. But we definitely welcome it. If you have any blog topics that come to mind, we encourage you to kind of brainstorm and share those with us. And we're happy to brainstorm with you if you'd like to contribute. All right. So before we go on to this, because this is kind of promoting our next DE&I related training, we wanted to see if there are any questions or comments. And I do see a couple in the chat, so I'm just going to open that up. Oh, those are just resources. Thanks. Thanks, Lisa. So any questions or thoughts, comments?
While folks are thinking, I'll just mention that the two links I put in the chat were one, the link to our staff page on our website, so you can see all of the different bios. I did send you the page for our full-time staff, but we also had our student staff complete this new template as well. So if you go to the About Us section, you can see our graduate assistants and our student staff as well. And then the second link I sent was to our affinity communities, because I know we went through the list of those very quickly. So in case you want to revisit those, you'll have that link as well.
Thank you all for participating. Lisa, do you want to go back to the other slide just so we can talk about? So we do have another D&I related training coming up called Redefining Professionalism. So that's taking place on Thursday, February 2nd at noon. So it's the idea that, you know, the concept of professionalism is changing, and it is subject to, you know, individual interpretation as well. But we want to explore that topic and, you know, talk about how being considered professional, how it may not be kind of this catch-all term, that we really have to think about how we're being equitable and inclusive and represent and celebrate diversity in workplaces. And so how do we, I guess, kind of coach students to, you know, come to work as they are, while also navigating workplace, differing workplace cultures. So this will be co-presented, I believe, by one of our employer partners, as well as a member of our Career Center team. All right. So I think we just have a couple minutes left. Any takers for any last questions, comments? All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa and
care.
Tara. I'm going to add also the link to our Career Champion resource page if anyone wants to join the program who hasn't already, and attend more awesome trainings like this. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, and I'll end the recording here.